The Witcher 3 is absolutely brimming with amazing content, with some of the best storytelling in gaming, but it has some real rough patches when it comes to gameplay, and boy is Wandering in the Dark the poster child for those rough patches. There are obvious reasons for this, but the surprising thing from doing this video is that I can now see a world where Wandering in the Dark is actually kinda decent. It took a conscious effort for me though to attain this enlightenment, so let me enlighten you all with my Witcher 3 quest analysis on Wandering in the Dark. Things start off right where Hunting a Witch ended, with Geralt and Keira Metz arriving at the dark entrance to the hideout of the elven mage who is looking for Ciri. The two start wandering in the aforementioned dark before quickly spotting the wild hunt ahead of them. They then wander in the dark some more, battling all sorts of enemies who mostly end up feeling the same, and wandering through samey looking caverns, solving rudimentary puzzles before fighting Nithril, a wild hunt warrior. After defeating him, Geralt and Keira find evidence of Ciri encountering the crones of Crookback Bog, and after tidying up some loose ends and more samey-looking caverns, they emerge from the cave having had their fill of wandering in the dark. So The Witcher 3 is pretty light on traditional dungeons, and this quest feels like their attempt at a dungeon crawl. But honestly, you can kind of see why they don't have too many of these, because this dungeon is not well executed. Like, everything just looks the same. There's nothing unique or memorable of what you see here. It all just blends together into a vague fog of nothingness. Like at one point, Keira says this,
"An old elven hoard."
And I was like, really? There's a statue and some water, but otherwise this is identical to everything else I've been going through to get here. Like, this is as nondescript as environmental storytelling can get. It's just a bunch of caves with no distinguishing features. And the combat encounters are as nondescript as those environments. I'm not a fan of the combat in this game. I think it's mediocre at best, but it's at its worst in these interior levels. Like, the enemy encounters all follow the exact same flow. Sure, foglets might puff in from the mist and golems might be beefy and burly, but essentially you're doing extremely similar things. And while that doesn't bother me in the open world, it is extremely bothersome in a dungeon crawl. But now it's time for me to speak in this quest defense. I'm doing multiple playthroughs for these videos, and during one of my runs of this quest, I actually found it to be way better than the first 4 times I played it. And why is that? Well, I just stuck to the main path and didn't get distracted by all those side passages. Keira gets lost in a portal. Well, I ran right through that portal to her. And when I came to this crack in the wall in front of me and Nithril the Wild Hunt is waiting to do battle on my left, I very logically chose to ignore the crack. That's what I'd do in real life. If there was a crack in something structural in my house, there's no way in hell I'm going to use art on that. And ignoring all that side content made the quest move much faster, to the point where it actually feels urgent and well-paced. But unfortunately, they try to make this dungeon as open-ended as the main game, when they should have just tried to make it play out like an Uncharted level. Like, does it make any sense narratively for Geralt to just start exploring side caverns when Keira just got lost going through this portal? Or worse, what about the moment when Keira says this?
"He awaits us."
Wow, a commander of the Wild Hunt is right there? Now seems like a good time to huff and puff and blow down this potentially load-bearing wall. These tangents deflate the tension and narrative urgency CD Projekt was obviously envisioning when they designed this quest. Like, seriously, listen to the music that's playing during the sequence. How could you possibly decide that now is the time to explore that side passage? But most of my negativity comes down to whether or not you decide to go and do those optional side paths. The quest itself is surprisingly effective when you just mainline it, because that's when The Witcher 3's primary strength comes to the forefront, the writing. The more Geralt stays on track, the more often you get to hear the delightful banter between him and Keira.
And that would be that. I knew we'd manage.
That's so? Make sure and tell me beforehand next time.
My intuition's a fine instrument, Witcher. Don't underestimate it. I've some very good feelings about you, for instance. In several domains.
See, in terms of writing and characters, this quest shows no drop-off from other quests. And therein lies the contradiction. I always thought that this quest sucked because it was light on story, but it really isn't. They just drag it out because you're doing all this nonsense on the side that doesn't matter. The pacing just gets all screwed up. But the story actually nails several beats. Like, bringing the Wild Hunt front and center here is a very good decision for how the plot is structured. The story so far has them as the primary villains, but indirectly, Geralt dreamt of them in Kaer Morhen, he and Yennefer get chased by them in a quick cutscene at the end of Lilac and Gooseberries, and Geralt finds their handiwork at the end of the Nilfgaardian Connection. But this is the first time that we really encounter them directly, as this is essentially Geralt and Keira chasing the Wild Hunt through the caverns. And we also get a couple of unique combat encounters with the Wild Hunt that stand out from the drudgery of most of the fights in this quest. You have this wave-based encounter with some Hounds of the Wild Hunt where Keira has to shield you from the frost. And then you have this boss fight with Nithril, a Wild Hunt commander or soldier or whatever the hell he is. Who cares what he does? He sounds awesome. The fight itself is decent. It can be a challenge in higher difficulties, but again, what's more impactful here is the way the game conveys what kind of threat they pose to Ciri, a character who is not in this quest one iota, but we learn a whole lot about.
That's him! That's the elf!
Message was definitely for Ciri, daughter of the Gull, Laura Doran's heir.
But what was the bit about the sign of her sword? A riddle?
Yeah, not a hard one though. Not if you know Ciri named her sword Ciri, swallow.
These little bits of trivia that we learn from the Elven Mage's puzzles and projections help us learn some more about Ciri, endearing us to this character that we as Geralt are spending much of the game trying to find.
Kelp? Does he mean that sea monster?
No, that's what Ciri named her mare. Horse could apparently gallop like a demon.
But the most important Ciri-related content here is plot-related. That is, that she has been working with the Elven Sage who is trying to protect her from the Wild Hunt, and that she may have encountered the crones of Crookback Bog. And it's upon learning about those crones that Geralt gets a bit fed up with Keira for not telling him about them during the Hunting a Witch quest.
Why didn't you say anything earlier? I told you Ciri had a run-in with a witch.
Come on, Geralt. If Keira told you everything, she'd be way less interesting. Keira is the star of Wandering in the Dark. She just exudes charisma and charm. We saw in the last quest her haughty and elitist nature, but here we see many different sides of her. She shows vulnerability both in controlled form.
Let's go. Wild Hunt got a good head start on us, but we still stand a chance.
Have you gone completely mad? We must leave here at once.
And in completely manic form.
Geralt, do something! They're crawling out of those holes! Use a sign or form anything! Lillard, get! Ah! Lillard, get! Get them all! Ah!
But she also shows great courage throughout the quest, and she shows a bit of tenderness and self-awareness that is kinda unexpected during this exchange.
Once you finally find Ciri, what will you do? Any plans?
Depends what she wants.
Imagined it? How it will transpire? What will she say? What will she look like?
No.
I'm sorry for getting ahead of myself. At times I forget we hardly know each other.
Yeah, Keira is on point in this quest, though she could use a better catchphrase.
Gavella Glan. Gavella Glan. Gavella Glan.
But Keira is not wandering that dark alone. Geralt bounces off her really well, as they have this great banter back and forth throughout the quest. And you could start sowing the seeds of a romance here by choosing to be all noble and knightly when Keira swoons into Geralt's arm after holding up that spell against the Hounds of the Wild Hunt.
Just don't faint on me.
Now, in your firm embrace, what a new life.
I'm surprised though that with that urgent music there isn't a third choice to drop Keira and go investigate cracks in the wall and just do God knows what. But while you can't do that, this wouldn't be Wandering in the Dark if you couldn't get sidetracked at least once more. You get to do this little side excursion at the tail end of this quest as Keira asks you to help her find a magic lamp that the Elven Sage promised her. This leads to a tiny side quest that feels innocuous enough, but Geralt does note that Keira hasn't been super forthcoming so far.
I shall tell you everything now, of course.
Now, after I safely led you through the cave.
So you're able to choose not to do this, though I don't know how much that choice affects things, seeing as you can say no and then run after Keira like a lost puppy and do the quest anyway. But regardless of the lack of any major choices here, the quest ends with a nice hook both for the main plot and for furthering Keira's arc. The crones of Crookback Bog are set up as some formidable foes that Ciri may have encountered, both by the Elven Sage's warnings, and this mildly terrifying account that Keira weaves about when she first arrived in Velen.
What's your take on this?
I'd love to shrug it off as the nattering of so many old women, yet throughout my first fortnight in Velen, I had horrible nightmares. Something was calling me out into the swamps. One night, I decided to enter the dream consciously, render it lucid. I confronted the thing directly. It broke contact at once. Peaceful nights ever since.
And as for Keira's arc, all of that buildup of her character and her flirty, seductive, and not necessarily trustworthy ways, it all sets up nicely for some meaty side content when Keira departs at the end of this quest, but not before inviting Geralt to help her out with some things. And because I like to live my life like Keira Metz, I am also waiting till the end of my quest analysis to ask you guys for a favor. Please like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know in the comments if you guys would be interested in me doing any Baldur's Gate 3 content when it comes out on PS5. I'm definitely going to keep on doing these Witcher 3 videos. I have no intention of stopping them, but I did want to spice things up with some other games. So let me know.
Why didn't you say anything earlier?
Because I didn't think it was a big deal?